18 students, 2 professors, 1 resident counselor, 1 destination.
Peru!
When our journey began, we barely knew each other. During the spring quarter at Principia College, we met once a week to prepare for our upcoming adventure. In September, we met in Miami and flew together to Lima, Peru.
Peru, located in South America, was the heart of the Incan Empire before the Spanish arrived in 1532 CE and colonized the region.
Today, Peru is a developing democratic country with a population of diverse ethnicities and cultures. In different parts of the country, people speak different languages, dress in traditional fashions, and maintain unique lifestyles.
Its president is Alan Garcia, and while it has been making rapid economic progress in just the past few years, its living standards in parts of the country are still far below those of modern industrialized nations. In this Latin American democracy, some citizens are critical of government corruption, and there is still a strong influence of socialist and totalitarian ideologies.
In addition to being culturally diverse, Peru also boasts a wide range of ecological regions, including deserts, high mountains, and rainforests. Our group was able to travel through almost all of them.
After spending a few days in metropolitan Lima, we took a long bus ride to Nazca to learn about the Nazca lines as well as pre-Incan cultures.
From Nazca, we continued our bus ride to Arequipa. After several days in Arequipa and an excursion to the scenic Colca Canyon, we traveled up to Cusco, where we settled into our homestay families and spent the remaining 6 weeks of our abroad.
We branched out from Cusco several times to visit Puno and Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world, to hike around Ausongate, a 22,000-foot mountain, and to explore Machu Picchu, one of the 7 modern wonders of the world.
Needless to say, our abroad to Peru was full of experiences and adventures that we will never forget.
Our arrival in Lima, the capital city of Peru, was a little jarring. A perpetual haze hung over the city, and traffic and noise congested the streets. Our hostel's neighborhood was a mix of modern marketing, flashy casinos, chain hotels, and upscale restaurants. Yet, just a few minutes' drive delivered us to areas struggling to remain clean, safe, and stable. We loved getting to tour the city, and we were amazed at the beauty and history of Lima's rich architecture. Here we saw firsthand the relics of a tremendous cultural exchange between the conquering Spanish colonizers and the ancient indigenous Peruvians. The influence of the Spanish was evident in the elaborate cathedrals and European-esque town squares. We gradually became more comfortable over the first week, visiting cafes, museums, grocery stores, and even a Christian Science church.
During the second half of our week in Lima, we traveled just outside the city limits to a sprawling municipality known as Villa El Salvador. Just 20-some years ago, fear of the Shining Path terrorist group forced Peruvians to flee their villages and seek safety near the larger cities. They left everything behind and became illegal squatters on what was then privately owned desert land. Despite facing tremendous opposition from the government and the military, their numbers grew and they were eventually allowed to stay. Most families started out with no more than some squares of cardboard and a few blankets. Over the years, the community fought hard to implement even basic amenities like running water. Now, thanks to their determination, they have public schools, international exports, factories, and even a zoo. To me, this was the most inspiring part of our trip.
Since the beginning of time, Peruvians have had to deal with earthquakes. This summer was no exception. On August 15th, a magnitude 7.9 earthquake struck Peru, killing over 500 people, interrupting schools, disrupting livelihoods, and destroying over 40,000 homes. This happened in Pisco, Peru, and the surrounding towns. We traveled past one of the towns that was affected by the earthquake. White stone from buildings lay strewn on the streets. Peruvians lined up to receive food and water. It was a huge eye-opener to see the kind of daily hardships some Peruvians face. On our way from Lima to Nazca, we had a 10-hour bus ride. During this time, we stopped at the beautiful coastal beaches. The beach was a great opportunity for us to stretch our legs and walk around. Some of us went on a run and others of us played in the seaweed. Well, some of us more than others. We traveled along the coast through rocklands and into the desert. It was stuffy and hot on the bus. Looking outside, we saw a little life on either side of the dunes. About 5 hours into the drive, a desert opened up into an oasis. There was a large pond surrounded by palm trees. There were colorful boats to row, ice cream stores, a church, and sandboarding. Sandboarding was one of my highlights of the trip. A man came up to Molly and I and asked if we wanted to learn how to sandboard. He taught us how, and we had a blast attempting to carve in the sand. It was awesome. I not only got to test my Spanish with a native, but spontaneously sandboarded down a dune in an oasis.
We traveled south along the coast to arrive in Nazca, a small mining town in a valley between the desert and the foothills. Dry, sunny, and home to an impressive series of ancient aqueducts that are still in use today, Nazca was a great place to learn about pre-Incan architecture and artistry. We visited a potter who showed us how he uses the ancient methods today, a miner, and even some of the local restaurants.
The next day, we woke up early and got into several Cessnas to fly over the desert in order to get a better look at the famous Nazca lines. The lines are a series of large sand motifs of geoglyphs that date back as far as 200 BCE. They are fascinating because they can only be seen clearly from the air, which wasn't possible during their creation. So, it's a mystery how and why the ancient Peruvians would create such beautiful symbols in the vast desert.
Arequipa, the city of white. While there is still disagreement as to whether the white refers to the volcanic stone used in almost all the buildings to avoid seismic damage, or to the white skin of the Spanish migrants, there is no doubt that Arequipa is one of the clearest representations of the impact of Spanish colonialism in Peru.
Contemporary Peru is a colorful tapestry of religious practices. While the Spanish converted most Peruvians to Catholicism during their colonial rule, it was not any ordinary Catholicism that Peruvians adopted. The early missionaries used many creative tactics to encourage devotion to the Catholic God and saints, including in their churches images that combined elements of both Catholicism and indigenous Andean religion. This syncretism is still evident in modern-day Peru. Catholic churches frequently have statues of the Virgin Mary in which Mary is made to look like a mountain with a woman's head, thus alluding to the Pachamama or Earth Mother that indigenous Peruvians have worshipped for centuries. Some churches hold Mass in Quechua, the ancient language of the Incas, in order to include rural worshippers that may not speak Spanish. Today, Peruvians often attend both Catholic Mass and practice various forms of their Andean religious heritage. Some visit shamans for healing, Others make annual sacrifices of food and gifts to the Pachamama. Many Peruvians, however, are not solely committed to tradition. Increasingly common is the growing conversion to evangelical Christian faiths, a pattern that is being seen across Latin America. These sects offer worshipers a more direct connection with God and a more democratic church structure that many find attractive.
Our journey into Arequipa brought us into contact with a lot of new foods. Throughout the trip, the group tried various Peruvian foods, such as ceviche, a seafood dish of chopped up raw fish in cubes with a lemon sauce. Cuy, the Peruvian term for guinea pig, is also quite popular throughout Peru, and many members of our group were able to try some. To me, cuy seemed tasty, but it was so small it required a lot of work to eat. Peruvians also eat a lot of potatoes, the most common crop in the high Andes, and rice. You wouldn't think rice would be so popular, but a lot of meals include some. Alpaca, a camelid related to the llama, was also a common dish throughout Peru, especially near the mountains.
Far removed from the urban scene of Arequipa, the people of Cañón del Colca live in small villages perched on the sides of this canyon, continuing to farm on terraces built under Incan rule more than 600 years ago. During our visit, the air smelled of fire, as the farmers were taking part in the burning season that purified the soil for the next planting. Most people still live the agrarian lifestyle their families have lived for generations, and the women wear the traditional clothing of their ancestors. We were able to observe some of their customs by participating in a ritual called Pago a la Tierra, or payment to the earth. This is a ceremony held at the beginning of each planting season, in which farmers offer gifts to the Pachamama. Later on in our visit, we were able to see majestic Andean condors fly over a deep canyon.
Lake Titicaca is the highest navigable freshwater lake in the world. At 12,000 feet, the huge expanse of calm, sky-blue water is breathtaking. The first place we visited were the Uros people, who live on floating islands they made entirely from totora reeds. The people shared with us their way of life and even let us try on their clothing, which was strikingly different from the traditional clothes we saw in the Colca Canyon.
Our next stop in the lake was La Isla de Amantini. The people of this island speak the traditional languages of Quechua and Aymara. The first thing we did upon our arrival was hike the mountain reverently named Pachamama. The view from the top was gorgeous all around as we watched the sunset on the lake.
stay, we had the chance to experience what it was like to work the land. Helping out made us respect the people of Amantani even more for tilling their chakras, or plots, without the aid of machinery, which would have been useless on the steep hillsides. We performed a ritual before sowing the seeds, a clear indication of the respect these people hold for the land, the sacred source from which all their crops came. During our stay, we ate rich but simple meals, made using ingredients mainly grown on the island.
Staying on the island of Amantani gave us an authentic insight into the rural communities of southern Peru and the traditions practiced therein. Their lifestyle involves constant hard work in taking care of the land and maintaining an almost completely self-sufficient food supply. The visit helped us realize the amount of work it takes to lead a seemingly simple life.
Tents and sleeping bags became our home for the 5 days we circumnavigated Peru's fourth highest peak, the 21,000-foot Ausangate. This trek gave us the chance to see firsthand geological and glacial processes, as well as ecological adaptations we had been learning about extensively in Gary's class. We hiked over 50 miles in all-weather conditions, crossed 4 high mountain passes, 2 of which were over 16,000 feet, and briefly experienced the diversity of the high Andean region.
Our group's previous hiking experience was very diverse. Some who live in the Rockies and hike all the time, and some who had never seen mountains before. But there was so much love and support within our group that it was the most rewarding feeling when we finished. It was an intense hike that pushed our boundaries mentally, physically, and spiritually.
traveling around Peru for several weeks, we arrived in Cusco, which became our home base for the next 6 weeks of the abroad. Cusco was a capital city, the navel of the Incan Empire, and continues to reflect a rich Incan influence, as well as the influences from Spanish colonization.
As you now know, the Spanish colonized what is now Peru during their conquest of the Incan Empire. The main plaza of the city has a lot of pigeons that the Spanish brought over from Europe and is bustling with activity. Surrounding it are buildings characteristic of Spanish architecture. On one side is the Catholic Church, and on the other, the colonial government building. These two edifices are found in almost every main plaza throughout Peru. The Spanish built numerous churches, monasteries, and convents around Peru in order to convert the indigenous peoples and to dominate over their native culture.
While in Cusco, we lived with homestay families and went to language school. Every morning we would get up and walk or take a cab to class. After school, we would go home and eat lunch with our homestay families. Lunch was the biggest meal of the day and was a time for our families to stop their work and come home to be with one another. The afternoons were spent exploring Cusco, studying, or learning about Peruvian culture and the ecology of the Andes.
Martín es la muerte! That is to say, he is better than life itself. From the moment we landed in Lima, Martín, our wonderfully amazing guide, was always with us. While we were in Peru, Martín and his wife Joni adopted all 18 of us into their family. His fun-loving attitude and sense of humor made each moment with Martín exciting.
While we were based in Cusco, we traveled to surrounding historical and cultural sites. In the town of Chinchero, we enjoyed a demonstration of traditional weaving from a co-op of women who had dedicated themselves to passing this skill on to the young women of today. The process was very organic. The wools were made from llama and alpaca fibers and dyed with colors made from the earth.
Dentro de mí brilla el sol.
We also visited many Incan ruins during our Cusco stay, each of which made up a different piece of Peru's historical puzzle. We visited an ancient agricultural testing site, a stronghold for the Incan royalty, the Incan religious center in the middle of Cusco, and many others. Each site had strong religious significance since the Incan religion was deeply connected to other parts of their worldview.
Tanto ruido, tanta soledad, gente que corre sin parar. Tras la puerta, este universo de infinita paz. Necesito la calma que tú me das. Se cae el cielo y qué más da.
After saying goodbye to our homestay families, we set out by train to visit one of the 7 wonders of the world, Machu Picchu. We spent the night in Aguas Calientes, a nearby town, and woke up at 5:30 to take the bus up to the site. We arrived at the ancient city to find its green grass and astounding stonework blanketed by fog.
As the rising sun slowly dissolved the fog, providing clearer and clearer views of our surroundings, we were able to reflect and find clarity on what our time in Peru had meant and would mean to us. The realizations were varied, from an expanded sense of family to a renewed sense of purpose in life to a newfound understanding of the interconnectedness of all humanity. We all, however, left with a profound appreciation for the Peruvian people.
My life, and I put it before you, and I put all that I have to lay in your hands. They're not gonna question to the why you're so faithful, to the why that you give me, the blessings that you do. The glory be known, the glory be shown. I just lift you up onto the sky. La na na na, la na na, la na 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 na. All I need is your love. Come and fill this heart of mine. Heart is a desert that is gone dry. I need your love to carry me by. All I need is your love to come and fill this heart of mine. Heart is a desert that is gone dry. I need your love to carry me by. To carry me by. To carry me by.
When I reflect on my time in Peru, I think about the amazing sights we saw, the wonderful group connection we had, the funny tour guides, and the tasty food. But when I think about what made the trip so amazing, I am filled with a humble gratitude for our group's opportunity, the chance we had to experience true cultural diversity, to be fully immersed in a culture quite unlike our own. I am humbled by the things I know now and the things I have yet to learn. I left Peru with a greater appreciation for the world around me. And even though Machu Picchu signified the end of our trip, to our group it meant the beginning of something new. Machu Picchu represented a promise, a commitment to ourselves that we would never forget the lessons learned, a promise to go out into the world to teach and inspire others to travel and learn about the incredible world around us.
When I walk through the streets of Peru now and see the vendors or highlanders poking through garbage or children selling finger puppets, I say a prayer for them. It's not the same prayer I used to say when we first met these people at the beginning of the trip, one of pity and wishing their lives could be like mine. Now I only pray that they might know the grandeur of their heritage, their Incan ancestry, and walk with their head high and their heart full of the knowledge that they descend from a culture of integrity.
Hot as a desert that has gone dry. I don't need your love to carry me by. All I need is your love to come out and